This is the CHGO Cubs Podcast. My name is Corey. I am joined, as always, by Brendan, and we are coming to you on Sunday. It is July 28th, and Brendan, the big news, what a weekend for Patrick Wisdom.
Patrick Wisdom is the lead, 2 home runs. Nothing else happened, Corey.
Wait a minute. I'm getting in my earpiece here. That is not the big news of the day.
Okay.
So this is, if you are a subscriber to the CHGO Sports YouTube page and a diehard fan of the CHGO Cubs podcast, this is your second dose of Chicago Cubs chat for the day. I know our guys, Ryan Herrera, Jared Willis, and Cody Del Mendo, did an emergency show earlier this afternoon during the game. That's dedication to break down the Christopher Morel trade. So no longer, Brendan, do we have to discuss his expected weighted on base average. And
oh, no. We're still going to be discussing expected numbers, Corey.
We're going to be discussing it when the Rays turn him into a perennial all-star. But I digress. Jokes aside, the real news of the day, Christopher Morel traded along with Hunter Bigge and another prospect from the Cubs system for Isaac Paredes, former member of the Chicago Cubs system. Cubs potentially have their answer at third base. There is a lot to break down. I see a lot of opinions in the YouTube chat. If you're joining us here live on YouTube, please drop your thoughts, even just your gut reaction to the trade. You can give, great move, bad move. If you want to elaborate, great. If you're listening on your podcast feeds, tweet at us, the CHGO Cubs feed. Love hearing the thoughts on this because this is potentially just the beginning. Obviously, we still have a few days before the trade deadline. This will be the last time you and I speak to everybody, Brendan. But we've already got a couple moves. Nate Pearson acquired from the Toronto Blue Jays. I feel like that's the kind of guy that you and Tommy Hotovy can get in the pitching lab with and try to
best friend, Tommy,
make that fastball work. But a big news day. The Cubs find themselves, 5+ games out of a wild card spot. So their position became somewhat clear, but big trade today on Sunday.
Big trade. Surprise. Was never on my radar. I knew Paredes was being floated around as a guy.
Big Yankee target.
Mm-hmm. But even earlier today, we're hearing about Seiya Suzuki and trade rumors. And we've been hearing about Jameson Taillon for days now across the AL East.
Jameson Taillon, who is technically slotted in to start tomorrow night.
He's going to start, isn't he?
That.
I mean,
he should not if they're thinking about moving him.
I mean, I don't know what
issue.
I don't know
have
what
to move him. That's it. Anyway,
I don't know
let's
what they're
stick to
thinking.
the trade that happened. We'll get to that.
But it was the best way to describe it beyond just surprising is it's fascinating because you get you trade two guys that are polar opposites. With Paredes, he's someone who generates a lot of runs, but does so with weak contact, but with heavy pull side contact. Yeah. Morel, on the other hand, is someone who has not generated runs, but he's in like the top 5 of bat speed. He's someone who hits the ball extremely hard, freak athlete. They're two polar sides of the spectrum, but one has succeeded and one has not. And Tampa Bay is taking the risk with a similarly aged guy in Morel and offsetting some of the growing cost and arbitration soon with Paredes.
Yeah. It is a very interesting move. I think on its surface, I will say this. I read the statement that, Jed quickly put out after the move was made, and really even going back to what he had said earlier in the week in the kind of media scrum about their intention and things like this. And I'll read the statement he put out this afternoon. Jed Hoyer said, quote, "As we have stated, our goal is to add players that will help us not just this season, but into the future. In the last 2 days, we feel we have worked towards that by trading those types of controllable players. Trading for those types of controllable players. Acquiring Paredes adds a proven bat to our lineup immediately and for years to come." There's a lot to digest with this trade. There's a lot of ways to take this, but at face value, Brendan, that is what Jed did. He did what he said he was going to do. They did not acquire only 2024 players. They acquired players that are cost controlled and will be part of their fold if they'd like them to be for several years to come. And that's That's what they did. So at the very least, like, he told you what he was hoping to do, and that's what this move is. As you said, it's a very interesting move. I think kind of dumbing down the way you said it, it feels like Paredes does not have those kind of that explosive potential that Morel does, but he's figured out how to harness his skills and succeed at the major league level. He is a master of the pull home run, like to an incredible degree. His spray chart is one of the most fascinating things I've ever seen. There it is. Like, this man knows how to hit the ball hard down the left field line, and he might be one of the best in the game at just that specific ability. So his baseball savant page isn't going to be as red as Christopher Morel's, but he's figured out a way to be successful at the major league level. At this point, you're talking about a guy who, going back to 2022, and that was the first year he was getting regular playing time with the Rays, 111 games, 116 WRC plus. The following year, 137 WRC plus in 143 games. This year so far, in 130. He was a 4.3 win player last year, already at 2.9 this year. This is a successful player for 3 straight seasons, and it gives the Cubs something that they have not had since they traded Kris Bryant, which is someone you can reliably slot in at third base, who can play an adequate third base in the field, and who has put together successful offensive years in multiple seasons in a row. I just got home from season ticket holder day at Wrigley Field. I was at beautiful historic Wrigley Field, strolling, gallivanting around as they let us do.
Licking Tom's boots,
yes,
per the usual.
And I was talking, shout out my wonderful season ticket rep, Zachary, who was there, and I was talking to him about it, and I said, I like Paredes. Let's see what the other moves are. I will say, though, and I'll die on the hill. You guys know this. I'm a believer in Christopher Morel. That doesn't mean that I inherently think this trade is bad or that I'm upset about it, but despite him not being able to show the results at the major league level, especially this year, and there's no two ways about it. He has been bad this year at the plate and questionable in the field, sometimes really bad, sometimes kind of good, whatever. I believe in him. He's young, and I think there's a chance that the Cubs look back and wish he were doing whatever he goes on to do with them. At the same time, Paredes is, at this point, a fairly established player, a good one, and that's, as you said, that's kind of the gamble each team is making. There's stuff you can look at in those peripherals. Are all of those home runs down the left field line in Tampa home runs at Wrigley? The answer is no. Actually, quite a bit of them would not be, but they still might be doubles, triples, things off the wall, etc. That's the gamble the Cubs are taking. The gamble the Rays are taking is the raw talent that Christopher Morel has. Can we figure out a way to pull it out of him at the major league level that the Cubs were not?
The main question that we'll have an answer to over the next 3 years is, can a player like Paredes succeed in multiple seasons in the fashion he has succeeded in Tampa Bay? In 2023, expected weighted on base average, if you like those, around 300. This season, again, around 300. However, in those 2 seasons, he was almost in the 90th percentile of just runs produced. So those are 2 very conflicting realities. We pointed to a spray chart. It's those extreme types of talent, if you call it that, the ability to put the ball to pull slide so frequently that introduces some uncertainty. You and I have talked about, we want to raise the floor. We want to have more certainty going into the season. The question I have is, what is Paredes' role going to be? Is he going to be slotted in as your 3-hitter or 4-hitter? If that's the case, then that amount of uncertainty, expecting Paredes to produce like this with that profile year in and year out, is a little unsettling. It depends what the resulting moves are.
Sure. I would hope not. I mean, that's obviously going to be the takeaway. He falls into that group now that, with, I think, Ian Happ, Seiya Suzuki, good hitters, guys that produce and are doing so on a year-to-year basis, 120, 130 WRC plus kind of guys. The real question, probably not answered at this deadline, I wouldn't think.
Well,
But this offseason is right. I mean, you never know. Can Jed go and get the stars to add around these guys? But I do want to underscore too, like, and we're also like Hunter Bigge is someone, in this trade. Johnson also, so like the Cubs gave up more than just Christopher Morel. At this point, I know I don't share necessarily so much of the concern about getting rid of Hunter Bigge. I feel like the Cubs are doing better in terms of drafting velocity, developing velocity. They just traded for Pearson, who has that great fastball, just kind of need to put some other stuff together. So I'm not that worried about it. I know it's fun to see those guys come up in the system, get their opportunity, and it feels like people just got excited for Hunter Bigge, for him to now be traded off. That part, I feel like the Cubs are in a place where they can figure that out. They can generate guys that can, have that kind of deal and stuff like that go forward here. The one thing I do want to underscore, which I'm not sure we really got into, I know you mentioned it briefly, like Paredes is not much older than Christopher Morel. I think he's only 4 or 5 months older than Christopher Morel. He does not have any options left, but he is ARB eligible for 2025 and not a free agent until 2028. So as we were talking with Jed's stated goal,
which is 1 year sooner than Morel in both. So Morel is a free agent going to 2029. He's ARB eligible for 2026. Yeah. So the baseline will be cheaper too. So the Rays are expecting to save millions of dollars as a result.
So this year his contract was $3.4 million. I would expect, just based on performance, that's going to go up.
5.
Yeah, or 7, 8, something along those lines. I'm not looking at comps. So it's going to go up. But it is to say, as Jed stated, like, you got a controlled player. This is a good player who has produced on the offensive level. He rates, at least looking at Fangraphs, as a slightly positive, barely positive defender. So a solid player. But again, how does Jed identify that star? How do you build that sort of, take that offense to the next level? But at its core, Brendan, this feels like a move where, for as much as I dream on the potential of Morel, and we saw good things that he was doing and good developments in his game, Jed is opting for someone who has proven it multiple years at this level and taking the risk that one day, years from now, he regrets giving up Christopher Morel. He's going for the proven thing at this moment. And when you look at this lineup, I have mixed feelings on this move. This is, again, one of those moves you got to judge it in context. As you said, if they don't go out and get a bopper for the middle of the order, whatever, on this, then does any of this matter? Probably not. But I understand the move from that perspective, and looking at how many games this team has trotted out a lineup with 3, sometimes more hitters that are just awful at the bottom of their lineup. You slot Paredes into this lineup anywhere, and that is a really solid hitter that you are moving into your lineup, and one less person with a 60 WRC plus and a 600 OPS that you're trotting out there every day, and then we come on here and complain that they can't score runs. So you've improved the offense today, and we'll see what the rest of the deadline holds.
But we've seen this on social a lot. There's a lot of conflicting opinions on Paredes' fashion of production.
Sure.
A lot of folks point to the heavy pull side and the weak contact as reason for pessimism. At the same time, other fans look towards his overall run production as reason for optimism at that age. I do want to at least reduce it down in that it is an unknown. You can't project Paredes with as much confidence as someone else with similar production who has more normal batted ball profiles. The Rays are trading Paredes in part, likely, I imagine, because of that. So in a way, they're getting rid of Paredes and the run production, but offsetting some of the risk in a unique profile. You can't compare Paredes to most guys in the past who are successful. So how can you confidently project someone like Paredes? It does not discount what he's done. He's been one of the best third baseman offensive bats in the league over the past 2 years. But it introduces questions of, can this continue in phase 2 of his career, in phase 3 of his career in the next multiple years? That ultimately is going to be the question, and one of, again, I imagine, the driving forces for Tampa Bay trading him.
Yeah. So we will come back in a second here after we take a quick break from our sponsors. Just because we didn't get to it yet, I do, it is worth this comment from Alex in our YouTube chat. There's a difference between the two of them. One has a defensive position, the other does not. That is
a big difference.
That is not a small portion of this trade. As
We're talking
I said,
like a 1 to 2 WAR difference right there.
Yeah, it's been years since you have had someone that can play third base and hit at an above league average level year on, year out, and the Cubs do have that now. So it is certainly not a small factor of this. But we will talk more about the Morel trade. We'll have the pitch doctor maybe take a look at new reliever Nate Pearson. Plenty to talk about here after we take a quick break from our sponsors.
Family Farms. Their culinary journey is woven with passion, dedication, and a commitment to crafting the finest bacon-wrapped chicken, a timeless delicacy that has tantalized taste buds since 1974. Join them on this flavorful adventure where every bite tells a story of tradition, quality, and the enduring spirit of Family Farms. The tradition continues. Now you can find Family Farms bacon-wrapped chicken even easier. Look for them in the meat department at your local Woodman's, Mariano's, or Burkett's. Experience the flavor that's become a family favorite for generations. Visit your nearest, again, Woodman's, Mariano's, Burkett's, or on Amazon, or at baconwrappedchicken.com. Blue Moon, Corey. Wish I had a Blue Moon right now. Some beers can say they're brewed for baseball. Only Blue Moon is brewed by baseball. Beer and baseball just go together. There's no beer that goes better than the one that was literally born in a ballpark. Blue Moon was created at Coors Field in Denver, Colorado. It's the natural choice for opening day. And as the season continues, even during the trade line for better or for worse, Corey. Blue Moon, we all know, is one of our favorites. I was in studio multiple months ago during our watch along, crushing some Blue Moons. I know it's refreshing with a flavor with a Valencia orange peel for a subtle sweetness and hints of coriander. Blue Moon Belgian style wheat ale is a one-of-a-kind beer that's made brighter. Why strike out with the same old beer when you can get something one-of-a-kind every time? Bring the ballpark to you with Blue Moon Belgian style wheat ale. It's one of a kind again every time. Get Blue Moon delivered by visiting get.bluemoonbeer.com/CHGO to see your delivery options. That's get.bluemoonbeer.com/CHGO. Blue Moon, made brighter, celebrate responsibly. Blue Moon Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado.
Yeah. So I do see our guy Cody Delmendo in the chat, and it is funny. He is correct about this. There's so much Christopher Morel slander, and when we were talking about he had bad luck earlier in the year, like there's a lot of negativity around him, and now it feels like everybody is jointly very upset that he's gone. So it is a little funny, but. I was looking at this tweet from Chris Emma from 670 The Score. Since the start of last year, third base rankings for Isaac Paredes. In wins above replacement, third, 7.2, weighted on base average, third, weighted runs created plus, third, RBIs, fourth, home runs, fifth. This is one of the better players at the position that you've been able to acquire. I think the batted ball stuff, the pulled home runs, again, I think it's like a drop of like 10 from Tampa, Tropicana, or whatever they call that now, to Wrigley Field. But again, that doesn't mean that those hits are outs. These can be doubles down the line. They can be, balls that hit off the basket, the ivy. You don't have to assume those are outs just because they, if you look at those ballpark spray charts, they don't overlay on Wrigley Field as a home run. Also, maybe he's able to, if he can push those pulled home runs like, what is it, 50 feet to the right, get it in that left center. They become
flyouts, though, at that point. That's the point of pessimism some folks will say to you.
So, again, those are fair Those are fair thoughts. But again, as we noted, like this guy's performed on a year-to-year basis. So it is sort of an interesting juxtaposition of you might look at the data and have concerns, but the results are the results, and he's found ways to do it on a year-to-year basis. And Morel is kind of the opposite, where the underlying stuff looks good, but expected stats you don't win championships on expected stats.
Well, I think the natural first reaction when trades like this happen is trying to understand who is going to win the trade and who's going to lose the trade. Are the Rays going to win the trade, or are the Cubs going to win the trade? And it's fair to look at it like that, but it's also more realistic to look at the intention of both teams.
Sure.
For the Rays, you don't have to pay $5, $6, $7 million in escalating arbitration for Isaac Paredes, who is producing for reasons that we have talked about maybe being pessimistic going forward.
Yeah.
From the Cubs' perspective, they have a lot of guys vying for a defensive position. Christopher Morel at third base, Michael Busch at first base, PCAs in center. What does that mean for Michael Busch and Cody Bellinger? Is Cody Bellinger going to go to first base and have Busch DH? Can Busch even be a long-lasting defensive first baseman, even though he's looked pretty good? The logic from the Cubs' perspective is, let's shore up one of the defensive positions. So you take that out of the Christopher Morel equation, and while you sacrifice some of Morel's ceiling, that top 5 bat speed, that high hard hit rate, that potential to be one of the high contact, the slug profiles, let's sacrifice some of that for average to above average, and in the past 2 years, well above league average offense and an average defensive competent third baseman. That is what Jed has ultimately decided to do. I understand it. I totally get it. It's a matter of what you do to complement that. The Rays complement Morel's acquisition with a high number of similar type projects. One of them works out, the other one doesn't work out, but that's how they operate. The Cubs, they get this escalating arbitration unique third baseman that may have a lower ceiling, but they still require that 3 and 4 hitter. Jed's overall response from the front office and ownership is going to be what you do to complement this deal. If he doesn't complement Paredes with a bona fide middle of the order bat, then this is going to be reviewed poorly.
I mean, of course, you have to judge it all in totality. It's what we say every offseason. You take a look at the moves and look at the team that's breaking camp or, starting the season at Wrigley Field in late March or whatever it is, and that's what you really judge. Each move in a vacuum doesn't particularly matter if it's not in the context of everything else. I think this makes sense for the Cubs, and I say that as someone who is a believer in Morel. I will continue to believe in Morel, even as I share the disappointment that he has not been good this season. But this is a safer bet for the Cubs, and that's what I think they're trying to clear up at the moment. Yeah. And as we've talked about,
but I'm like a little. I hear you, and not to push back on that, but to voice other people's, and I share a lot of those concerns. I'm sick of this whole safe, wishy-washy stuff. Sure. This is a bold move. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. This is a good move, but we do require greater ambition. Sure. We need to raise the standard. We need to at some point acquire one of those true bona fide type hitters where we're not talking about a 5th percentile bat speed and exit velo. I want certainty, and I don't want to go in year out with the same type of conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, the key to this deadline and this offseason, outside of just this move, is this team has got to figure out how to score runs on a more consistent basis. They have got to get closer to that team that blows teams out that Jed has talked about. That is where this team needs to get to. And it's nice to have solid hitters. Ian Happ's a good hitter. Seiya Suzuki's a good hitter. He apparently can't play the outfield. We'll talk about that maybe another day. We don't have
nothing
time
to talk about. He just needs to play the outfield better, and we want to talk about.
But at some point, you don't want to build a team of just good hitters. You need those elite level hitters. We've been saying it for years. It's going to keep being true. That being said, though, I like this trade in the sense that, as we've said before, since you traded Chris Bryant, and really toward the end of KB's tenure as well, you have not had an answer at third base. It's a big position. It's a position that a lot of teams get a ton of their offensive value out of. Historically, it's one of the better offensive positions in the sport, and the Cubs have had no answer. And we have seen them trot out some miserable options at third base, Brendan, over the last couple of years. Guys that should not probably even be Major League Baseball players, let alone depth pieces on a team with playoff ambitions or a $200+ million payroll. Paredes has been an all-star. He's put up the numbers the last 2 years. He plays solid defense. He is a third baseman. He's proven it. He's done it. And sure, there's risk. There's risk with a lot of players. But it answers a question that the Cubs have not been able to fill for the last going on 3+ seasons. And so at the very least, I am happy to check that off, and we'll see what comes of it. Again, they have to make a lot of decisions. This team is not good enough as it was currently constructed. It was very expensive, and at the moment, you're sitting in last place still. You're locked into some of these guys. Several of these guys have no trade clauses. Several of them have contracts that would not be easy to move, even if you wanted to. So Jed's got to figure out ways to address the available positions, maybe convince guys to waive a no-trade clause or figure out how to move some of these guys around, because what you had wasn't good enough, and it was expensive, and it was fairly locked in to certain positions. So he's still got work to do. He may have to get creative to do it. But this is at least penciling in, okay, instead of guys that cannot play defense and are sub-replacement level or have a 65 WRC plus. I mean, at one point, we were rotating between two guys that had like a combined 700 OPS in Nick Madrigal and Miles Mastrobuoni. You've got a guy that has been 130 the last 2 years, is an all-star, good defender. It moves the needle at a position you have been really bad at. And there's still work to be done. We'll see what the rest of the deadline and the offseason holds. But at the very least, you got a good player. And you're not going to get an answer on whether you regret giving up Christopher Morel for, I don't know, years, potentially. Yeah. And these things have a way of not being always super obvious. I think there was a period right away when, like, Eloy came up with the White Sox. It felt like, well, this is a slam dunk. The Cubs lost this trade. They're going to regret this till the day they die. And he's done nothing since. He can't stay on the field. And at this point, does anybody care that they traded Eloy? Dylan Cease is great. It's the same trade. I'm not getting into relitigating that. I'm saying there's times where it feels like, oh, no way, they can't let this guy go. He's a sure thing, et cetera, et cetera. And then years go by and you're like, yeah, I don't care that they did that. Nobody cares about that anymore. So I'm not saying Morel goes one way or the other, but at some point the Cubs had to pick a lane of either continuing to give him time to prove that he can do it at the major league level or needing results, and they opted for results.
Yeah, I think the deal makes a lot of sense. In one sense, I'm disappointed that we have one less option to achieve that cleanup hitter role. That it, for all intents and purposes, although he's been very productive, he still has the same uncertainty to be that bona fide cleanup hitter, 390, 400 plus WOBA guy. He has not been that, Paredes. He likely never will be that, or it's hard to ever say he will currently with that batter profile. So we have one less option where that's realistic now. Morel could have done that given his profile, although it was less likely and he hasn't produced whatsoever.
Yeah, I was just going to say at this point, as much as I believe in him,
exactly.
That's a big could have.
Exactly. It is a big could have, and Morel has been worse over the past 6 weeks, whiffing more than he used to. A lot of the same process tended to fizzle out in the last 6 weeks. So that also starts to make you question if you can ultimately even be league average when you see those types of trends continue. So there's a lot of nuance to this, but overall, I will say I'm happy with the deal, but I'm disappointed that it's changed so much since the end of April. Towards the end of April, you're seeing massive changes from Morel with a lot of contact, a lot of power, and you start thinking, man, he may be maybe that guy. And then you fast forward, like this sport does to you and humbles you all the time, 3.5 months later, and you don't have that potential as your cleanup guy anymore. And you opted for a very good bat in Paredes with team control at $5 to $10 million over the next 3 years, but you lose that possibility. So I shared the disappointment with fans who genuinely believe Morel could be that guy.
Yeah. We have plenty more to talk about, probably a little more on the Morel-Paredes trade. Want to talk about, your feelings on letting Hunter Bigge go. Want to talk about Pearson, the pitcher they got from the Blue Jays. We will talk about all of this and more as we keep going. I also want to talk a little bit about a very interesting trait that Jed apparently has in terms of trading for players he's already traded away. It's very interesting. But
let's trade for Javi.
Yeah, he's homered in 3 straight games.
He's back
going into Sunday.
Yeah.
We will talk about that when we get back from our ad break here.
What is Sunnyside? Sunnyside is your home for judgment-free cannabis shopping, a place where all kinds of visitors are welcome to explore, discover, and purchase a wide array of high-quality products. Sunnyside has everything you need to elevate your summer. It's a one-stop shop for all your cannabis needs. Sunnyside has an expertly curated menu with over 100 strains to choose from, plus easy online ordering and in-store pickup. Sunnyside is Illinois' favorite dispensary with locations in the city, including Wrigleyville and River North, to the suburbs in Champaign, South Beloit, and more. If you're starting out too, Sunnyside has expert guidance and brands that we know you'll love, like Good News and Mindy's. But if you're a pro, they've also got you covered with over 100 strains on the menu and new ones added weekly. Here for the summer is Good News Tea Time Disposable Vape, bringing classic lemonade flavor that's perfect for the golf course because we all need a little help staying loose on the green. Visit sunnyside.shop for bright buys every day, including 50% off your first 3 online purchases. Enter promo code HICHGO at checkout to qualify. Exclusions do apply. Sunnyside Cannabis Dispensary, bright buys every day, only for 21 or over or Illinois medical card holders. Make Ray Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram your #1 draft pick this summer to find the perfect new car for you. This July, shop a wider selection of vehicles at Ray CDJR and score new lower prices across their huge inventory during the Make This the Summer event. For a limited time, lease a new 2024 Jeep Compass Latitude Lux for only $189 a month, or shop over 125 vehicles priced under $20,000. Let the amazing team at Ray CDJR help you land the perfect vehicle at the perfect price, because with Ray's price promise, the numbers you're hearing now are the same prices you can expect to shop in-store and online. That's because Ray's price promise means no price changing, no add-ins, no hidden fees. Since they prioritize affordability for the customers, hurry into Ray CDJR today and shop one of the Chicago area's largest inventories, then drive home with more money in your pocket than you'd expect. So if you're in the market for a new vehicle, then you have to check out the team at Ray Chrysler Dodge, Jeep, and Ram, because they are the only team we recommend. Visit them today on Route 12 in Fox Lake. For more information, visit Ray CDJR in Fox Lake or raycdjr.com. Serving the community since 1963.
All right, Brendan, and as we continue talking about the trade deadline, got to give our Pork Power Player of the Weekend to Patrick Wisdom. Patrick Wisdom provided the power for this weekend's game, pinch hit grand slam on Saturday, insurance run homer on Sunday, and that is presented by the Illinois Pork Producers. Savor the flavor, savor the gains, and celebrate any occasion by enjoying the best pork produced by Illinois pig farmers. So, all right, Brendan, back to it. I wanted Patrick to be our Pork Power Player of the game in case any teams are looking for depth bat, guy to come off the bench, hit a home run. We're showcasing. We're trying to help Jed Hoyer here, showcasing the players. Towards the end of the show, we'll talk about maybe some guys that are still in those rumors, guys maybe we expect to get moved by the deadline. We can touch on that. I do want to ask you about the two relievers. We can go back to the Morel Paredes thing, but I think we've offered, kind of clearly articulated our thoughts. I don't know if you have any more graphs or anything you want to, but I'm curious. Cubs acquire Pearson from the Blue Jays, big fastball, a highly touted guy, but obviously has struggled. And then the decision to let Hunter Bigge go. Curious as the pitch guy, and just putting everything into context, what the Cubs have needed in terms of their pitching staff, stuff like that. How do you feel about these two moves? I know I already saw Pearson was in the bullpen working with Tommy Hotovy. They're getting to work on Sunday. He's already there. They're already dialing him up to their various machines and trackers and everything. But how did you feel about the two relievers that the Cubs move this weekend, acquire or move this weekend?
These are projects, like many projects the Cubs have worked on over the past few years. I like good relievers with good stuff. I also like stable relievers with good stuff. The goal is to get Nate Pearson to that point of stability, former top prospect, someone who throws 99, 100, 101. The slider he throws, you can think of the slider as essentially a normal slider, but with 2 to 3 miles per hour more velocity. So that's an advantage. He's able to generate a lot of horizontal on the slider with more velocity. So that is unique. The fastball shape, we've heard, may need some improvements. The way that it could be improved is taking its current shape, which is around average carry and average run, and maybe slightly manipulating it in a different way. The numbers this year: strikeout rate around 12 batters per 9, walk rate just under 4 batters per 9. You would expect those two to produce and save runs, but for some reason his ERA is well over 5, so you have that conflicting reality with Nate Pearson. I'm not sure what Tommy's going to do. There's a lot of ways you can go about this, but he's an interesting guy with great velocity and good stuff, and you want as many of those guys as possible in the system.
Well, and I would say if we're just judging off of one singular thing, the Cubs have had recent success taking someone the Toronto Blue Jays could not figure out how to work with in Julian Merriweather and getting him to work.
There you go.
My feeling on that, and it sort of pairs with Bigge. I know you didn't speak on that yet, but I feel like the Cubs have had success with some of these moves. We want them, part of the concern coming into this year was, did you address the bullpen enough? Did you give them enough support so that it didn't break down, so that you weren't relying on the same guys every day? And we didn't feel like they did that. It didn't help that it took Hector Neris like 3 months before he was able to be effective at all. But I was waiting for you to do your bit. That's Major League win, relief pitcher win leader Hector Neris.
He has more wins than most starting pitchers, Corey. Just saying. His ERA is now almost under 3, which is kind of funny, actually.
Yeah, but you do want them to do more, but in terms of, you're always looking to find value in putting your bullpen together. You're always looking to see if you can find a diamond in the rough or reclaim someone's career, etc. And they've proven a good ability to do that. So I don't, I have no expectation for Pearson necessarily, and I liked, the potential of what we saw from Hunter Bigge. But in terms of those like smaller, lower risk bullpen moves, they've proven to be able to find those guys and develop some of those guys, not with a 100% success rate, but I think they've done a good job of it. The question is putting together a full group that has that potential and gives Craig next year more options, more stability, and avoiding having to run certain guys into the ground because they're the only guys that can get outs. So that's kind of how I feel about the relievers that moved in this particular market. And, even just thinking about it, I know he's a guy that people are looking at to potentially be traded, but they've done unbelievable work with someone like Mark Leiter Jr. Mark Leiter Jr. has been lights out. I know our guy Cody likes to tweet that literally every time, he gets out of a jam, but he has been unbelievable since he has come back and rejoined this team from injury. Is that someone they look to trade? We'll see. But that would be one of those things. I mean, this is a guy you DFA'd. He was a starter with no success. If you were able to turn him into whatever at the deadline, you've already gotten great production out of him. But I just bring that up as an example of like they found ways to make this work. So I'm not going to lose any sleep over them trading Hunter Bigge or anything like that. And we've also seen how fickle the relief position can be over the years, because I remember there was, concern like Alex Lang was doing stuff in Detroit for a little bit, and that didn't last very long. And I think that success has completely gone away. And it's not something, so like there's those little periods where you go, oh man, like the Cubs had this guy, et cetera. But bullpens are a tough thing. Relief pitchers are a fickle industry. I'm not going to lose sleep over it.
Yeah, fickle is the right word to describe it. Hunter Bigge has had, 3 appearances in the Big so far. He's unlike Nate Pearson. I saw someone say he's like Nate Pearson. The similarities, they both throw very fast. Hunter Bigge has that unique fastball shape that maybe Pearson will try to capture with Tommy Hotovy. But the reason that you go out and get a Nate Pearson is so you can actually expend someone like Hunter Bigge to try to bolster your bullpen and increase the number of possibilities for bullpen success. I don't really have like any major, opinions on this. They're going to keep doing this. Yeah. We're going to see guys come in and come out. Yeah. So this year it hasn't worked. It's been disappointing. They've had success in years past. They've had more success with older pitchers. So Nate Pearson, I think, qualifies as that guy compared to developing them in their early 20s, 20, 21, 22. So if there's a reason for optimism there, it's that they've had success turning older guys into legitimate, somewhat stable relievers fast. So maybe that is the advantage and the thinking with Pearson over someone like Hunter Bigge.
Yeah. So I am curious, like it is funny that Jed trades for guys that they have previously traded, isn't it?
Well, that's
or
one
no,
way
I don't know. It's probably not funny.
It brings back bad
assets
memories
for things you had, but
yeah. Well, it brings back bad memories. We have look at all the damage that Justin Wilson has done to this franchise. You trade Jeimer Candelario and you trade Isaac Paredes for Justin Wilson. And Justin Wilson has the nerve to tell Anthony Rizzo to shut up.
You'll take that to your grave. Yeah.
That's the thank you we get, Corey. That's the thank you we get. But in all seriousness, it is fun to see some reunion. Isaac Paredes, I loved him when he was first coming up through the Cubs. He was 17 years old, 18 years old. And I thought, wow, he's having the success as an 18-year-old at that level, hitting balls far, not striking out that much. I thought, man, this could be a guy. So I was disappointed when they traded him for Justin Wilson way back then. And it's fun to see him come back and see the actual success that he has had. And a lot of the conviction that the Rays have with someone like Isaac Paredes is validated. And it reinforces the importance of a young hitter who makes a lot of contact and hits the ball far as a proxy for future success. It is fun to see him back.
Yeah.
The Justin Wilson gift was alone worth the trade. I don't know, Brent. Although it was a great gift, but a lot of pain coming from that trade.
Very funny. So yeah. We have one more ad break to hit here in a second, but it's an interesting time just because I feel like Jed is not done here, and being in the position that the Cubs are in is a particularly interesting one because it means stuff isn't super obvious. And what I mean by that is, like, you had a guy like Jeff Passan who was having to clarify in a really long tweet, like, this doesn't mean the Cubs are buyers. It doesn't mean they're sellers. Like, they're getting players, as Jed said, who have control and who can help them, not just right now. Like, Paredes will slot into this lineup and help you right now. But it's also about the years to come. And that means I think like kind of anything is on the table.
Well, I like the intention. I like the idea of not just keeping it simple and sell, buy, but you actually make these surprising, somewhat creative deals.
Yeah, and I mean that's why you've seen, I think you mentioned it earlier where you've seen like Seiya's name in talks and stuff like that. And some of these guys have no trade clauses. You'd have to talk to them about that, etc. But it is interesting to at least explore the possibility that like anything might be on the table. Like they might move anyone if the price is right, if it helps them accomplish their goal, and if they're looking internally at this group, as we said, like, hey, this isn't good enough. Like it's not that simple of a thing to answer if you have all these guys under contract and all of them need to play a specific position. It was already complicated, even thinking like, okay, when Bellinger comes back, are you prioritizing PCA's development in center? Do you want Cody out there? Do you want Michael Busch continuing to get better at first? Like it's already a little crowded and the team is in last place. So that means that really anything can be on the table in these next few days before the trade deadline. So it makes for interesting and I think potentially anxious watching of these rumors and of the sort. But I think we all want the team to get better. Like at this point, I texted you the other day. I'm like, I don't care. Do whatever you want. Trade anybody, acquire anybody. As long as this team is getting better, I really don't care at this point.
I mean, one last point before we move on and do the ad break here, but the concept of how you play Bellinger, how to say a fit in the future, are those trade talks real or not real? At the end of all these discussions, I hope we come back to 2025 in April, and we know this team is likely a good team. Yeah. Bellinger is a good example. If you look at profiles of hitters who hit the ball hard and hit the ball at a plane, like a line drive or fly ball plane for home runs, what we see is on the top right, Ohtani hits the ball hard, hits the ball very far on a plane that tends to be home runs, and as a result, he gets a lot of runs produced. Or WOBA on this graph on the y-axis. You look at Paredes and Bellinger on the left, they tend to be higher away from that gray line, which is the correlation between those types of hard hit rates and line drives and home runs. For some reason, Cody Bellinger and Isaac Paredes for multiple years now have outproduced their expected numbers, okay? But we want those purple dots on the top right. Among those guys, you're going to see Gunnar Henderson, Aaron Judge. You're going to see even Schwarber up there somewhere in those universe of dots. But we want to get away from those like lower, outlier type traits. We want the real, bona fide type hitters. And I hope that this doesn't get lost in that discussion. Sure. It's an interesting trade. I definitely see the logic, but it's leaving me wanting more still, and that has not changed whatsoever.
Yeah. Right. So we'll hit our last ad break here, and then we'll come back. And one thing I want to talk about, too, is, do we have a feeling on – I think a lot of people would have been surprised if Jed was let go, especially right now, even at the end of the year with 1 year left in his contract. I'm curious your opinion. Let's talk about, do we feel like this is the type of move that someone who's panicking makes, someone who feels like they're safe makes? What does this tell us anything about Jed and the front office's position and how they're feeling, et cetera, et cetera? So we'll talk about that in our last segment.
Well, listen, if the Cubs need to make a hire, well, guess what? They have Indeed. If the Cubs need to hire, or if you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed does not just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. I don't have my own business. I don't hire, but I have friends who are starting their own businesses who are much in our same age group. They use Indeed all the time. They're getting good candidates. I have friends who use Indeed to get jobs. I hear nothing but good things about Indeed. Indeed, leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences. So the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. Corey.
All right, Brendan. And with our friends at Indeed, we do get to check the resume. We have 2 new Cubs. So we check through the resume. We've, of course, got Isaac Paredes.
Look at that dip in his mouth. Look at that. Look at that dip in his mouth.
Their old school uniforms are real nice.
Yeah, those are pretty sick,
I got to say. Yeah. As we all know, signed as an international free agent with Chicago Cubs. then went to Detroit. The Cubs traded him there. Then, of course, an all-star with Tampa Bay. Also have the Indeed resume for Nate Pearson, as Brendan just talked about. Had missed the 2022 season, first-round pick in 2017. As we heard from Brendan, the numbers don't look great on the surface, but the Cubs are going to put the work in to try and turn that resume into something more. So thanks to our friends at Indeed. And so in our last 10 minutes or so here, I am curious, Brendan, do you have any feeling on what this move suggests? Because I know there was a lot of chatter in our YouTube chat and even just on social media that if the Cubs got to the point that they were selling, and again, they're not really doing that. They're doing a hybrid of that. But should Jed be the one to make those decisions? Should you have a guy on a lame duck contract if you go into next year with just 1 year left and allow him to trade someone like Christopher Morel or trade some of these big prospects, James Triantos, Owen Casey, if those guys come up in a big name trade, should a president in this situation be allowed to make those moves to potentially be saving his job? And it's a nuanced question, but it's not a completely unfounded one. This feels like the type of move. I don't know. I mean, do you think this is the type of move that Jed's making if he feels the fire under his butt, if he feels safe because he feels like he can move on from a guy like Morel, or hand is not tipped at all? We have no idea.
We have no idea. I would be shocked, even if the season turns more poorly, if Jed is let go in the offseason. I'd be shocked. Jed, for all the disappointment at the major league club, ownership has expressed for a decade now their desire to churn out high-quality prospects. And despite the major league club playing poorly, the Cubs have one of, if not the best system in organized baseball. I imagine Tom wants to see that through before making an extreme decision of hiring not just a new president, but likely overhauling top to bottom the entire baseball operations. It's a big effort for Tom Ricketts, and one I think he might consider risky given that the farm system has been producing results so far in the past 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree. I think, it's just in the game of sports, the world of sports, to use the same word, it's a fickle business. We saw Joe Madden win a World Series, the most coveted World Series in sports history.
What year was that?
The 2016 Chicago
2016 Cubs. Okay, correct.
And he got 3 years. That was his leash after doing that. And then they moved on. So you see coaches, they win a Super Bowl, they get fired the next year, a few games into the season sometimes. These things happen. It's a fickle business. You get paid a lot of money to have these jobs, and people want results. So it's a fair conversation, but I tend to agree with you. I do feel like at the moment, I don't think we've reached that point where I would expect Tom to make that decision. I would hope that the results we've seen so far this year are not acceptable to Tom, and that there's going to be some pressure maybe starting at this deadline going into the offseason obviously it's the last year of your contract, Jed, but you have got to get results on a bigger level. We cannot be missing the playoffs. We can't be having these deadline discussions again. What does that look like? I don't know. But yeah.
You got to fire whoever made their internal projection system that were supposedly much higher than the public projection system.
Perhaps.
I'm being facetious, but
you're going to have to hope that their projection system on Paredes.
You know what's a good projection, Corey? Yeah. That usually leads to playoffs? Over 95 wins by the worst projection system. Yeah. Let's use that one. Let's use that one.
So we do have a super chat from our guy Fernando. Appreciate that. Fernando, charts and graphs. Now I understand the trade. Go Fernando. Cubs. Appreciate it, Fernando. And yeah, I do agree. We have our good friend Tyler in the chat. Just saying the trade doesn't signal anything. Jed got a good player, better player in the deal, and that's all it is.
Yeah.
And I tend to agree. I was just curious. It's one of those things that a lot of people are chattering about. What does it mean? Does it signal anything? So
what does it mean that they got Craig Counsell? Will they spend this offseason, Corey?
We were dead wrong about that. Oh, yeah.
I didn't say anything.
Nothing
Maybe
signals anything. Nothing means
signals
anything.
No.
Yeah. So it's going to be interesting. The Cubs have a lot of potential guys that could be in the mix for this deadline. I know we've talked about Jamison Tyone. I'll be very curious. They did list him as the probable starter for Monday night's game. If you have any intention of trading him, that's obviously a mistake to let him do that. He's got a 2.9 ERA. The FIP doesn't look as good, but if you're a team that needs starting pitching, he's a veteran. He's pitched in two of the biggest markets in the sport with success. He would look mighty good if the Cubs pay down this year.
Didn't they do this with Matt Garza like 10, 12 years ago? They accidentally pitched him and he got hurt.
Probably.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Was
sounds
that Theo's front office?
Yeah.
That was Theo's front office.
So
not good.
As a reminder, the trade deadline is July 30th at 5 Central, 6 p.m. Eastern time.
It's not the 31st anymore?
No.
I thought it was August 1st last year. They keep moving the deadline?
They do keep moving it. I mean, listen, I don't trust me on anything, but I'm looking at an article on MLB.com.
July 30th. What time is it up?
5 Central. I just said that.
5 Central. Not Eastern?
Central, 6 Eastern.
Okay.
6
They keep
Eastern.
changing the times. I want the same time and same day every year.
So we'll see. I mean, I think Tyone is a potential guy that could move. Mark Leiter Jr., Drew Smiley, and sometimes they're, Hector Neris. I mean, there's guys too where like,
Mike
at
Tauchman.
times it would seem like as fans of the team watching, you'd be like, why would anybody want that guy? Sometimes like veterans with a track record, like even if they didn't perform for the Cubs in a couple months, they're worth taking the flyer on if the cost is right and you need just those veteran presence in your bullpen.
I mean, you have to think Tauchman's going to be traded.
Tauchman, absolutely.
Yeah. Just because PCA is getting playing time, Bellinger's now up there, Seiya's going to be in right field. Yeah.
And we've heard plenty of other names. Whether those rumors are real, it's your best guess. You have to use your best judgment on that. And, we've seen people writing about Justin Steele. Brendan and I have offered our opinion on that. Seen people writing about Seiya Suzuki, Ian Happ. Again, these are guys with no trade clauses, and Ian Happ has been quite effusive in his insistence on wanting to stay in Chicago, his love of Chicago and the Chicago Cubs organization. But we've seen it get talked about, so we'll see. A lot of potential to move things. Here's how I want to end this though, just by reiterating what my hope is for this deadline. And I do feel like Paredes it does help us get there. The 2024 Chicago Cubs are a very expensive team. Obviously, we know that. We've talked about that a lot. They are currently in last place. I'm pulling up the updated standings here because usually when Brendan and I do these shows, there's still games going on. But the Cubs are, of course, there is a pop-up ad that I can't see on the MLB.com website as I'm trying to pull up
block those pop-ups, Corey.
Great website.
I got the standings right here. You want me to read them?
No, I got it. Okay. So the Cubs sit 5 games out of a wild card spot, but they are behind the Giants, the Pirates, the Cardinals, the Diamondbacks, and then the 3 wild card teams, the Mets. Half game up are the Padres. 1.5 are the Braves. So this is a very expensive, not good team. And what I want for this deadline is for Jed to actually come through on that stated goal. Get good players that help you win next year. The standard that you have set for these last 2 years is not good enough. And each year sort of exists in its own vacuum in a way. Like 2023 had its own expectations. It's relative to when you traded guys, what your timeline is, etc. 2023 is the same, 24 is the same, but you can't you're going into year 4 of Jed Hoyer's presidency over the Chicago Cubs. They have won 0 divisions, 0 wild cards, 0 playoff games. They have 1 finish at the moment above 500. They are trending in this year for another below. It's not good enough. They've done good work in growing the system. They've done good work at identifying and locking up some good, solid MLB players. They've found a way to churn out pitching from their system. They have one of the best pitchers in baseball at the top of their rotation from their system, from their developmental path. They've been bringing up some relievers that actually have velocity for the first time, probably in our lifetime, Brendan. That they're coming from their own system, guys that can touch triple digits, as opposed to them trying to reinvent the wheel with a bunch of guys that throw 90. They're doing some good things, but what Jed has not shown an ability to do is reel in the big fish and get that absolute stud player that you need to be a championship caliber team in this league. There's 3 ways to do it. You can draft and develop them like they did with Chris Bryant, wins an MVP, Rookie of the Year, helps you win a World Series. You can trade for him like they did kind of with Anthony Rizzo, even though they developed him a little bit too. Or you can pay them the most money and give them the best contract in the offseason. And at this moment in his tenure, Jed has not proven an ability to do any of those 3 things, not just for any free agent, but for, or big, player, for the big fish, those elite players that take this team from an offense that can't score runs consistently to a team, as he has stated he wants to get to, that blows teams out. So starting at this deadline and going into the offseason, that's where we need to get to. And that doesn't mean every trade has to be for immediate impact talent, but if we have a full deadline where the big gets are 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, things like that, it's they have enough of that. You have got to start winning and producing at the major league level. So use this deadline to get you closer to that goal. I think Paredes is a good start. He's got to keep it going.
Yeah, I would love to get to a position where we're not talking about looking at certain players' trends and whether they can continue. Yeah. I want to get to a point where we're talking about guys who could bolster a team already projected at 95 wins. I want to get back to the point, obviously, of 2016, 2017, when we were having those discussions. I want to be at the point where the Braves are at right now, where half their team is dissipated by injuries, and their 5th percentile worst outcome is still they're going to make the playoffs this year, likely.
I'm surprised you even waited that long.
Yeah, so that's where I want to be. We've talked about injuries and poor outcomes and bad luck, and the Cubs' bad luck put them 7 games under 500 2 days ago, okay? The Braves' bad luck put them 8 games above 500 in the second place in the wildcard spot right now. That's the goal, to offset all of that nonsense. I'm tired of talking about nonsense and seeing in between the lines and squinting and hoping. I want those true top-level talents, and I want and we need this front office to get to that point this offseason.
Yeah. And, I tweeted something about Hoyer the other day, and I see in our YouTube chat from our friend of the show, Tyler, there's no big fish that's available, or it's going to be Juan Soto again. I'm not quite sure, Tyler, what you mean by he would frustrate the hell out of me. He has a 190 WRC plus this year. I wouldn't be frustrated by.
Who, Juan Soto?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would not be frustrated.
I wonder if those rumors...
155 last year. I would not be frustrated by anything. But
quick question before we sign off, because I got dinner reservations over here.
Sure.
The Juan Soto Christopher Morel discourse we had during the offseason.
Okay.
In hindsight now, do you think that discourse would have changed with fans?
I don't know if I really recall. Was that like a real...
There was a rumor I think it was Bruce Levine. I think he said it was Morel.
Okay.
Well, he said you know how it is. Local media does. But there was discourse of would you trade Morel straight up for 1 year of Juan Soto? And I wonder.
I do remember that.
I wonder if fans would change their minds these days, because
I don't.
You do that in a heartbeat, dude. You do that in an absolute heartbeat.
But really, what I was getting at though is that's the bigger conversation for Jed, and we've talked about that before. But like each year and each move you don't make, there's been a lot of trades that the Cubs have not been a part of. Star players have moved. Star players have signed in the offseason. And if there's nobody available in this offseason, that's Jed's problem. He gets paid millions of dollars to figure this out. If he finds himself in a position where he needs certain things, well, that's what he gets paid millions of dollars to figure out. So what I mean by that is, like, a good example, was Matt Chapman the only answer for the Chicago Cubs in this past offseason? Was he the best answer for the Chicago Cubs? Well, maybe, but that's because you didn't address that position the year before, or the year before that, or the year before that. So he's the president of the team. He gets paid a lot of money to do this. It's up to him to forecast these problems and have the solutions. And, sometimes I get responses that are like, well, who would you have signed? What would you have do? listen, you cut me the $4 million check and I'll come up with a better answer for you. In the meantime, I'm going to complain about the guy that is getting it. And I think that's reasonable for the market that the Cubs are in. But it's going to be interesting. And, you know, again, one thing or the other, like Jed would be going into a year where this is the last year of his contract and he hasn't won squat. So he's going to have to turn that around in order to get a new contract and save that job. So we'll see what the rest of this deadline looks like. As always, we had an emergency show, I think, within 10 minutes of the Morel news breaking. So do check that out on the CHGO Sports YouTube channel with our guys Cody, Jared, and Ryan. Their full breakdown. Obviously, we continued that. And if the Cubs have emergency show level moves, Nate Pearson wasn't, Isaac Paredes was. The CHGO team will assemble in some form or fashion to break it down and have an emergency show as quickly as we can possibly assemble. I think our record was for Craig Counsell. We were on the air within like 5 minutes.
I'm not giving you credit for that one. You guys were already in studio. I had to wake up at 1 a.m. to do Cody Bellinger breaking news episode.
Well, fine.
That's right. I want my credit for that one. And Cody, too.
Fine.
We both deserve credit for that.
Yeah. But we will assemble. We will have a show, an emergency show, as quickly as we possibly can. So you can stay tuned to the CHGO Sports YouTube page, CHGO Cubs Twitter feed, etc., etc. Brendan and I will be back with you next Sunday, and we'll see what happens. So it's going to be an interesting few days here. Plenty of potential Cubs could be on the move. And as we saw today, maybe guys you're not expecting to come back and be the Cubs' return. So we will see what happens. Good luck to Jed Hoyer and his team. I only hope that whatever they do, they end up being correct. That is all we have for you. We appreciate you tuning in to both shows here from the CHGO Cubs team on this fine Sunday. We will talk to you again next week. As always, thank you, and go Cubs.
We all silly like the mayor.